Hello and welcome to On the Record, a debate-style television talk show where Bahamians will find the balanced, true and open debate you've been looking for. The election of a new government is always met with high hopes and expectations of change, new opportunities, and a better way of life for the most part. But a campaign promise and the realities of government don't always align. The honeymoon with voters ends quickly as the work of government and running the country now supersedes the wonderful speeches and campaign slogans. The challenge is balancing the wants of the people with the needs of the country. 2 years after their election victory, the Free National Movement admits it's lost ground with voters while making some tough decisions. But did they create this dilemma by promising more than they could deliver? Or were leaders of the party naive in the realities of government? Tonight on The Record, we look at facing the realities of government, walking the tightrope. It's all on The Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Our discussion begins on the other side of this break. Hello and welcome to On the Record, a balanced, true and open debate you've been looking for. This is On the Record. Who really calls the shots? The people elect a government to work on their behalf. But when you depart from the will of the people for the good of the people, the relationship with supporters can become strained. And then there are those who voted against you, but still require your attention and good governance. Facing the realities of governance, walking the tightrope is our topic tonight. My guest, Brad McPhee, the National Deputy Chairman of the Free National Movement, along with Leonard Sands. He's the former president of the Contractors Association and also a former candidate with the Free National Movement. Gentlemen, welcome to our show. I wanted to continue in something that we have been focusing on all month on the Record. We've been looking at the Free National Movement's celebration of the second year in office since winning the election, but also looking at where we are in terms of governance and the reality of it. I think a lot of people, for the most part, think once an election happens, you go into office and you almost begin to wave a magic wand and things should happen, but that's not the reality. I want to start out by asking, does the F&M government find itself in a position of having overpromised too much to the public?
Well, I think regarding a question like that, you might want to say that the Bahamian people expected a whole lot. Right. Right off the jump. Sometimes they don't fully understand exactly the process in terms of when you have a new slate of people taking over from the older ones. You got to look at the paperwork. You got to look at the initiatives that the previous government started. You got to look at a lot of things and projects that they had on the board, and now you got to take that information, apply your promises or your mandate that you wanted to do or what you want to do for the country, and carry out the process, have discussions, and do so many different things where you know it's going to be different from the previous government. And like I said, a lot of persons have a lot of high expectations. Bahamians they're frustrated. They're trying to get their bills paid. They're trying to better themselves, and they depend a lot on the government programs, initiatives, and etc. A lot of stuff that the government say that they want to do if they are allowed or if they are voted into government by the people.
Well, I think that this government promised a lot. I think that this government has done a good job on the things that matter. I think the challenge that this government will face is making the people understand that not everything that was promised can be achieved.
When you say things that matter,
The way I look at governance, and I want to be very distinct how I answer that, is that what are the most important things that was pressing to the people in 2017? At the time, it was crime. At the time, it was the economy and debt. I think this government has been making successes and doing a great job in that area. Now, there's other things that I think is falling off the wagon, but if that's the most important things above all the things that were promised, how could you give them a really bad mark? In my opinion, the important things they're focusing on.
and I always ask this question, are those the things that matter to people every day? I asked, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I asked the Minister of National Security, when you talk about paying down the debt, that's something that the FNM has touted. That's an intangible. As far as I'm concerned, that doesn't affect my everyday life. While it speaks to, you know, obviously the state of the economy at some point, but when you talk about paying down the debt, you know, my debt is still the same. Whose debt are you paying down? I still owe. You know, I'm still struggling to do the things that I need to do every day. So how do you justify something like that when you say, well, you know, we've increased value-added tax. This is an additional burden of taxation, but we're using this money to pay off some debt.
See, the thing is, no government can run without taxes, without taxing its people. That's the way they are able to carry out a number of programming initiatives, like I said earlier. In order to do a whole lot more in terms of, let's say, education, for example, you want to get some stuff done. We are already at that point where we are borrowing over $200 million a year just to balance our budget. We had a deficit of what, 237 million?
Yeah.
Right? And so we have to we have to find a way to have more income to get more stuff done. You look at, like I said, education. We want to have a digital educational system where we provide internet, because if a student is at home and they're sick, they still could go online and they'll still be in class. They wouldn't miss any classes. We want to have it where each class, each student has an iPod. They have access to the internet. We're at that age, technology age now, where it's no longer, or it shouldn't be so much textbooks, exercise books.
Shouldn't be. I see.
Right?
Yeah, that's another.
Right? So the world is progressing, the world is moving, and we don't want to be left behind education-wise. When you look at, in terms of, you mentioned crime, we just hired several new police officers who are going to start the program, and that's an increase in salary. You look at the program, the initiative in terms of the new system set up, does what, CCTV, along with the speakers that will detect gunshots. In the past, I've heard many police officers talk about stories where a shooting will take place through Rupert Dean Lane. The police on its way, and then somebody from that corner will call and say it's in Fox Hill. So now the police get the call, no, it's in Fox Hill, so now they're heading in a different direction where actual shooting took place. So now they don't have to depend so much on the persons who live in that area. They have the CCTV, they have the detection system, and now they go based on that. They gave us an idea, that was like about 2 months ago, they gave us a view on how it works. I think it's a very good system, it's a very reliable system, and it should help somewhat deter that level of crime.
Leonard, what would you say, though, are the things that continue to agitate, continue to agitate people that aren't being done? You know, that's a good explanation.
Yeah, that's a good explanation.
Sometimes I wish government members would answer things that when asked. But what are the things that continue to agitate people that aren't being done? I mean, people look at crime, and you know, it depends on where you sit. I mean, sometimes we're still in a bloody season, as far as I'm concerned, but the numbers obviously show a little different. But what are the things really that you see that continue to goad us daily?
Well, the first thing that this administration will deal with in 22 is the increase in value-added tax.
Well, that was my next question.
That will be around, and it will be. No, honestly, it will be the biggest thing they have to fight with. You know why? Because the Prime Minister, while in opposition, said it was the laziest way to get money. The laziest way. And then you increase the laziest way. It just doesn't seem like you thought about it. Now, I understand what is going to be paid for, all that good. But the guy on the road is going to remember, you said this was not the best thing for an economy, and then you increased the thing that you said was not the best thing. That's the first thing. I get what it's going to be used for. I get it. The second thing, crime only matters to those affected. So, like you talk about intangible, if you're in a gated development, crime really ain't that important to you. It's not that important to you. It's important to everyone a life was lost. So, and schooling. Listen, we have people who graduate from our public schools, go off to universities, come back, become doctors, lawyers in our country. I think we have a very good educational system. The intangibles are being handled well. Here's the thing that's not being handled well. Access to housing. This administration has not built, 2 years in now, it's not their fault, but not one house.
What do you mean not their fault?
The
Whose
list
fault
is
it?
now some 8,000 plus persons
But no,
asking
what
you,
mean
we need a house,
it's not their
one house.
fault?
It's not their fault because you have a marketplace where the persons who are asking you to build houses for them can't afford to pay for the houses. So what do? Continue to increase the public debt by building a house and giving it to someone who can maintain the house in terms of paying for it.
Okay.
The mortgage corporation has already told you, this is the list of people we currently have who hasn't paid mortgages in 3 and 4 or 5 years. So we have a problem in our society where a large number of society is not being served by the policies. And the most important policy, I think, is housing.
Okay,
Not being addressed
what
at all.
else? You mentioned housing, what else?
Housing and healthcare. Now, national health insurance, I applaud the continued effort to get it in a place where it's going to work. But the challenge is, the guy on the ground doesn't understand we need $800 million. He don't understand that. All he knows when Grammy need to go to the hospital, get a surgery because she need to replace a lung, a spleen, or whatever, and she don't want to have no bill. Right now, the public takes on that burden. You could go to the hospital, you could get that care. It takes a long time because it's free. And you're talking now about employers and everyone paying for that. The public need to understand it's going to be seemingly free. But you're paying for that.
Okay. Well, one of the things I want to know, ask is, one of the most, and you mentioned it, one of the most controversial changes was the increase in value-added tax. Did it come too soon? It was almost, you know, you were elected, you had a budget in place for the most part, and then the next budget out the gate, there was this increase in VAT, and it came as a surprise. We all found out during the presentation in the House of Assembly. Even members of your own party did not know that it was coming.
See, the thing is, Jerome, in order to run an effective government, it's almost like running a business. And you must have funds, you must have an income to make that happen. The majority of our budget, our expenditures are salaries. All right, so you want the government to implement all these different things. You want the government to build this. You want the government to subsidize social services and subsidize all these different entities. We talk about load shedding the other day. We just brought in 2 or 3 brand new engines.
They hook up anytime, so my
that-
life was
that's
just
a
off for the
question I
past.
can't answer.
Okay, sorry, I got a rhetorical.
All these things must be done where we can get the money from. Now, let's look at all the programs we have for persons like who want entrepreneurs, small business persons. We just put in place, we just implement a program or a policy where if you make $100,000, you don't have to pay for your license anymore. So now that's monies that are gone. Where are we going to get it from? How are we going to replace it in order for us to carry out all these other projects that we want to do? And so that's where the government came to a position and said, oh, you know what? we're going to add an additional 4.5% on the 7.5%
Okay,
that
so
the previous government initiated. not
Right.
the free
Okay.
national
So
movement.
right. Okay. So granted. All right. Now, glad you brought that up too,
That 4.5%.
because I remember the hell raised by the then opposition members about the introduction of value-added tax and where it was going, and you pushed this. It was pushed. A pushed notion that we didn't know where the VAT money went, and the PLP took the money and did as they liked, with the people's money. And to your point, and I agree with you, the things that we want as a country take money, and somebody has to pay. But it was almost as if we were blindsided. There was really no preparation for us to be able to now, take on the burden of this additional. It was like, it was introduced, and in no time flat, here we were paying this these additional taxes, and without a good explanation. I mean, we heard, yes, we want to do these things, but even today I ask and continue to ask, is the public being properly informed about where the money is going?
Well, Jerome, I'm glad you asked that question, because every quarter, the Ministry of Finance produce information, current updated information on expenditures, income, how much is collected from VAT for the last 3 months, for the last 6 months, for the last year. So every Bahamian, the information is transparent. Every Bahamian can either go online or look in the newspaper or on social media, because I'm seeing it everywhere. They can read for themselves exactly what's the income from VAT
And
other.
are you satisfied though that even, I can't remember who it was that said, but if you want to hide information from,
Yeah, you put it in writing.
Put it in writing.
put it in writing. But, is that being articulated properly by government members whenever the opportunity is given? Are we hearing that? Because let's be honest now. Social media, while you say it's there, you're also being bombarded on social media with information to the contrary.
Yes. But the thing is, we had this conversation earlier that us as a people, we like social media. Sometimes we got caught up with so much gossip and propaganda till we bypass the actual information that we need to know.
Don't let the facts get in the way of a good story.
That's the information that we need to know. And so if you are an individual, you are concerned about your country, and even if you want to have a debate because you're a part of not a political party, whatever the case may be, get the information, get the facts. Get the information is published. You can go on, like I said, you can go online. It's over social media. It's on the newspapers. Everybody talking about it.
But now,
And I'll challenge you on that too.
Brad, I'll tell you one thing. Talking about 22, I tell you, I mentioned VAT. I think the government is doing a good job in the areas that some people are not noticing. I think the government accessor program is an amazing program helping entrepreneurs, because up until 2017, everyone complained, we want to be owners in the economy, right? Guess what? Thousands of young Bahamians are becoming owners of the economy. You're not hearing a lot of noise about it. There should be a lot of noise. But blindsiding the Bahamian people again. The who? No, I mean WTO. Why? Why now?
Well, then, in all fairness, too, we've been
Come on
talking
now,
about
Brian.
WTO since the 90s.
I
As a
know.
young reporter,
I know.
about covering issues related to WTO. So, I'm
It was
I'm a
in
little
campaign
surprised.
on.
Well,
Why
that's true.
now? See, the government today will be held accountable to what they promised, and also the things that happened that you didn't even tell us about. It's not, and I understand the WTO, but I think the guy on the street, Rupert Dean Lane, the government bring WTO, we can take away my job, go and give it to a foreigner. How do you combat that? See, that message is deep, and it's going far and wide.
And it's resonating.
Well,
And it's resonating
It is
strongly
resonating,
in this
yeah.
country.
It's always-
Why was that one of the things in the first 2 years the government chose to deal with? I don't know.
Well, the thing is, we've been an observer now for many, many years.
15 plus.
And
15
That's
plus.
a long time to be
I
observing.
can't speak to the details or the limitations on when you could actually join after being an observer for so many years. The government right now isn't really looking at the membership. The last time I checked, they wasn't looking at the membership right now. That's something that they're just under discussions. All
But
right,
you know that's not
but-
the message.
But I understand that, and
That
that's
is not-
why,
again,
and that's
the
why
message.
your persons on
Gen-
there talking about
Yeah.
this WTO.
Gentlemen, we've got to take a break. We'll pick up on the discussion right after this because we're out of time for this segment. Here we go with our first break. When we come back, more on the record right after this.
You know, Matt, where in the world is Matt Lauer? Where in the world is Ellison Greenslade? And so these about the
Listen,
value of cost in Atlanta. So we can talk about
More on the record tonight. The government's purchase of the Grand Lukine is a hot subject in the news. We're going to And we're back. Last week, the FNM celebrated 2 years in government. Many party spokesmen lined up on the airwaves and in the press to defend their record and to justify some of the more unpopular decisions and policies. But are the explanations good enough? Facing the realities of governance, walking the tightrope is our topic tonight. My guest, Brad McPhee, the National Deputy Chairman of the Free National Movement, and Leonard Sands, former President of the Contractors Association. A lot of times, I find members of the government having to defend, having to respond, having to react, because there is that messaging from the outside that's driving the conversation. And I sit back, and even as a public relations practitioner, I look and I think to myself, who is controlling this messaging? Why is it that the government is always finding itself in a responsive, reactionary mode, as opposed to really directing the narrative?
Well, one of the things that I think one of the responsibilities of any government is to educate and inform the people. So far, I'd say in the last 2 years, we were able to inform the people as much as we could. The message needs to be carried out a whole lot more, and we need to step up on public relations then. That's not a question. But hopefully within the next year or two, that you'd see a major change in terms of Bahamians being informed and knowledgeable about everything that's taking place with the government. What they're doing in the last 2 years, there was a lot of discussions on negotiating and planning. Now you see in the last 2 months where they're sending pictures and information about the port development. They're talking about Grand Bahama, upgrading Grand Bahama, the hotels being sold, the ports being developed, projects in different family islands. So now they're sending out that information as much as possible. But it needs to be a whole lot more.
I'll give you an example of something that I noticed this week. You had the company that, I think it was GBI, that opened up in Grand Bahama, was touted as being, the forerunner to all these great tech companies that were coming to Grand Bahama. The company's now closed. I saw WhatsApp messages and Facebook comments, and here's this big, here's this success story that the government touted that's shut down now. On government side, almost crickets.
Well, honestly, I can't answer to it. I just heard about it yesterday.
Right,
I haven't gotten information on it.
Without being specific, those are the kinds of things that, let's be honest, that's hurting the government. Yeah. And the opposition forces have jumped all over it.
And then there was the, and I'm saddened for the messaging challenges of this administration. You had the issue with the oil refinery billion-dollar project, or was it oil reducing billion-dollar project?
You mean Oban?
Oban. See, I don't want to call a name.
No, you can call a name. I can call a name on his own.
Yes, it is a bad word. And I think you got to look at that and say, okay, if it was a misstep, like the Prime Minister had mentioned, how do you recruit? Because it's still out there, it's still going forward.
And that's still a misstep.
And say it in a way that the Bahamian public could understand that this is what the deal really is. If it's an oil storage facility, say it clear, say it enough time for people to understand. If it is an oil refining facility, which is being said out there in the public domain,
and two different names,
totally say it is not that. So I think that this administration has challenges with controlling the narrative. But I want to go to an area that we talked about briefly offline. I think education in our country is good. As someone in our educational system, I can tell you students at the University of Bahamas perform better than students in America. All day. So don't tell me about how bad our education system is and we need to put iPads in schools and all that stuff. Do I believe that we need to increase the level of technology in schools? Absolutely. I think the Minister of Education is doing a good job. I think it needs focus though. What is the areas specifically that we need focus on? We live next door to America. SATs should be a standard leaving measure because we want our citizens to go and get a higher education.
But
If
then
not, the University of Bahamas,
we don't
right?
subscribe to the American
But why
educational
shouldn't we?
system.
We live next door to
We have
them.
our own system.
But we live next door to them.
Why do we need SATs? Why do we need the U.S. testing
Because
system?
you were fortunate to go to St. Augustine College where that's a part of the curriculum. I went to government high school and I had to take those exams, the SATs, after I graduated.
Well, but the thing is, it's been said that our BGCSE testing system is at a higher standard than SAT.
It can't be used inside America.
No, it can't be used. But
It
our
can't be
system,
used.
If our BGCSE's testing system standards are much higher than the SATs, then taking the SATs should be a walk in the park, right?
Which is not.
It is not. It's a different
It's
system.
a different system.
It's just a different
but
system.
then again, of course, it speaks to, and I
Readiness.
always raise this
Global
question,
readiness
is
is what we're doing.
our educational system overall relevant?
Relevant, global readiness.
Are we, I still see, and we differ on this, but I still see kids coming to school with tons of textbooks and workbooks, and like, you know, children are all, they learn differently. They are introduced to technology almost right off the birth. You know, things that we struggle to put up with, you put them, you know, we struggle to learn.
know how to do it.
In seconds, they picked up on.
And that's why the Ministry of Education right now is in that process of digitizing the whole entire educational system, where every child, every student will have that iPad in front of them. But let me respond to this point on the Oban situation.
Yes.
When I first heard about the Oban situation, of course, I heard it on social media. I heard about
where we-
Oban.
this is where we get all of our
there were
news.
there were about a million factors that surrounded this one story. I heard about oil leaks, dredging. I heard about all kind of different stories, right? Whereas there's only a particular company that's opening up a refinery, to my understanding, all right? And I think the major problem was the environmentalists wasn't a part of the process here.
There was no environmental
Right.
impact assessment
But-
done. Yeah.
But the
Well,
thing
that's
is-
not the only major problem. There
But
were
the thing
others,
is, but the
yeah.
thing is, Jerome, because of all the different stories and propaganda that surrounded it, it kind of muddied the minds of persons
Yeah.
about this particular
It didn't
project.
kind of, it did.
So you didn't get nobody who didn't know the actual facts could not get a full understanding of what Oban was really.
And
But
then
the
you
public
had
is
the
people who wanted
debacle
to
with
know
the
actual facts.
and then
I
you had the
understand that.
debacle with the signing, which then which overshadowed almost everything else. You
Yeah,
had somebody
totally screwed up.
signing somebody else's name,
Yeah.
and it was almost like a runaway train.
Yeah. Which wasn't really.
That's still running.
Yeah, you gotta.
So
clarify
I
the
want to
message.
know though, do you think that by and large, looking at the whole 2 years, that is probably one of the biggest missteps and black eyes that the government has?
Probably so.
How do you clean it
Probably
up?
so. And you know, I look at it as something that, you know, no government is perfect. At some point.
But Rod, you
at some
all
point-
beat
at
the
some
PLP with a corruption stick the size of Andros.
But this was nothing corrupt.
You all
But
beat
this
the
is nothing corrupt.
PLP with being ineffective. You know, there were a lot of messages put out there about what the PLP was not doing. And so the expectation was that the F&M government would be held to a higher and a better standard.
But
Are
see-
you satisfied that that's
Now,
happening?
I would say this, Jerome. There was no transaction of any funds. There wasn't anything to do with who's going to approve what project or whatever the case
But a
may
man
be.
falsified, he signed,
It was
he
only a simple,
committed fraud on
it
a
was only
document.
a simple process where a signature was signed. There was
Right.
no.
That's
there
not
was
a
no-
simple
there
thing.
was
If
no-
I sign
there
your
was no
name on a
paper-
document, I could go to jail for that. That is a simple
Understood.
thing.
Understood.
That's not
Understood.
a simple thing.
That-
And you
that was
can't
the-
simplify something like that
Yeah,
and
that
expect
was-
people
that was a misstep.
to say,
Understood.
okay,
that
let's
was a
just move
misstep.
on now.
I
Now
understand that.
here's let me segue into something different if I can, Jerome. Southern Bahamas, yeah, as a person headed the Contractors Association, Southern Bahamas, untouched. Ragged Island, Green City, Green Island.
But,
When is this gonna happen?
but
When is it gonna happen? I need to know that.
I'm glad you asked that question.
Yes,
When
please
is
answer.
you ask-
We're going to answer that and then go
Ragged
to a
Island
break.
hammer?
Yeah,
I need to
answer
know.
that. Yeah.
And you talk about why we need to increase taxes at some point in order to get certain things done. You want to boost the economy in Crooked Island and Michael, you need funds for it. You want to boost you want to turn Ragged Island to what you call it, a
Green Island.
Green Island.
It's a beautiful
You need
concept. I
funds for
like
it.
the concept.
It's maintenance wise, it's not as expensive.
No, it's not
But in
expensive.
terms of actually putting
Building
in
it up.
Infrastructure is
it's a
very
lot.
expensive.
Very.
Very.
Do you expect to continue to tax people and then win the election next time around?
Well, now it's important for the
Nah,
government
that's a tough
to
one.
show you
That's a
and to
tough
show
one.
you
That's a tough
exactly
one.
where this money going.
Where the that money going?
Exactly.
Don't bring that up.
And that's why
That's
every
how we
quarter,
retire.
that's why every quarter we say how much
right.
we get, and this is what we're doing.
All right. Well, I often wonder whether the ordinary Joe Blow, whether the housekeeper on Paradise Island, whether the nurse at the hospital, whether the construction worker, the police officer, the defense force officer, whether those people are understanding where the money is going, because you and I will take the time to read and analyze and understand. But the average, ordinary, everyday worker, they out there every day trying to make a living. They ain't got time to sit down to analyze, document and understand. And a lot of times written in language, like I say, sometimes it's almost Arabic, because it's not written for the ordinary person to digest and understand. That's just my point. Gentlemen, we're going to take a break. Folks out there, if you're enjoying our discussion, stay tuned. Our show continues. We've got a third guest joining us. All of that coming up right after this break. Hello and welcome to On the Record, a balanced, true, and open debate you've been looking for. Tonight we continue our series of shows examining the government's record in office. This week we take a deeper dive into the complexities of governance. Facing the realities of governance, walking the tightrope is the topic tonight. My guest, Brad McPhee, the National Deputy Chairman of the Free National Movement, Leonard Sands, a former President of the Contractors Association, also a lecturer at the University of the Bahamas, and joining us for this segment, Edison Sumner. He's Principal of Sumner Strategic Partners, a commercial diplomacy consultancy. Gentlemen, welcome. Edison, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
We've gotten in on a very good discussion, bring you in now. I see. Had a good time. Now, one of the successes that this government has touted is the improvement in the ease of doing business. I have to ask, is that a reality for many businesses today? Are people seeing and feeling that in the business community?
Not yet, but I think it's a work in progress. We're seeing some improvements being made in the plans to deliver government services, right? But I think if you were to speak to many businesses, they would say that they're still feeling the pinch of some of the inefficiencies of getting business done in the country. But I just happen to know for a fact that there are some plans in place. There is a National Ease of Doing Business Committee.
Right.
That was established shortly after this government came into office. And I know they've
One of
been
the members
working-
I had on a previous show when we talked about that.
So now they've been working assiduously to put plans in place and make recommendations to government on ways to improve on the ease of doing business in the country. But I think there is certainly going to be a process that they've got to go through so that the average business will begin to feel the impact and effect of their work. When we look at things like issues of productivity in the workplace, which is going to be a significant part of what this whole transformation is going to require, you're talking about having to have essentially almost a cultural shift in the way business is done in the country. And that is being considered from both the public and the private side, right? So on the public side, it's going to be on transforming government services. It's going to be on digitizing government services in a lot of ways. On the private side, it's going to be how do we feel the impact of what's happening in the government system, right? When we go in to get business done, whether it's applying for business license online, whether it's applying for certificate of registration online, whether it's applying for an immigration permit, etc. how do we feel the impact of that work when we make these applications? How do we cut down the lines at the passport office? How do we, when we go to the immigration department to get a permit for a colleague to come into work? And we've seen some adjustments made in that in the last several weeks. So the idea of the ease of doing business, I'm certain is perhaps on top of the government's list of priorities of things to do during this term in office. And we've seen some work being done towards that effort. But I believe this is not going to be an overnight fix, right? It's been 2 years now that they've been working on it. We're beginning to see some adjustments made in some of the government services, like digitizing some of the services, putting them online. But it's also going to require a collaborative effort between those of us who operate in the private sector and those who operate in the public sector.
As that's happening, is the public being made aware of it? Because what I see are people crying out every day about the lines at the passport office. People are still complaining about the immigration process and having to pay under the table to get things done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
These things still exist.
Yeah, I think this government has inherited the same people that we have always been. We often complain in the face of a good thing, So I want to say that on the offset. I think there have been improvements for those of us who engage the system. There have been improvements. But you will hear the noise in the market more often than the price of the fish. Now, what is inexcusable? Inexcusable is the lines at the passport office.
Oh, I agree.
I just don't, for a population so small, you're telling me you can't process one, whether it's 15, 20,000 people over 2 months? Really? I just don't understand how. Because you could go to a major city inside the United States and get 1 million people processed.
You can send a
in
passport. You can get a passport at the U.S. You can get a U.S. passport done in this country faster, and that has to leave the country to come back.
What we're saying is unacceptable. But I will not be the fool to say that is this administration's fault or problem. That is a system problem which the ease of doing business has to correct.
But Brad, how do you now counter that though? Because as a citizen, my pushback is you in charge. I voted you in for change. I wanted better. You promised me better, but I still have to go to the passport office at 4 a.m. I'm using that as an example, but that's a problem that's systemic across the system. Yeah. And after 2 years, as a voter, I'm saying, my man, I gave you this opportunity. I am still experiencing these hardships. I voted for, I wanted better. This is what people are saying. I wanted a change, and I'm still saddled with the same inefficiencies.
Well, I'll say that even if you look at the business license model in terms of where you don't even have to go in now to apply for business license. You can actually do it online. I think the same model is going to be set up for your passport. Now, how you tweak that or how you secure a system like that, because a passport is extremely more critical than a business license and more secure.
It's official. It's an official document. Yeah.
Once the government could set up a system like that, then that 4 o'clock trying to get on the line, and then when you get to the door 9 o'clock, they ain't taking no more applications is a thing of the past. But I'm sure, I know for a fact that the Minister Dan Henfield is trying to resolve that particular situation as we speak.
But listen, let me just say something on that quickly in the passport issue. I think we've come to a point now to accept that the issue of the passport office cannot be a political issue because it's existed for so long under successive governments, right? So I don't want to get to the point where we blame the finger at the current administration or the former administration. It is a systematic problem and a systemic problem, meaning that over administration, and this is going back as far as I can recall, even as a child. In fact, it wasn't as bad as a child as it is now, right? I don't remember standing in line as a child, 4:30, 3 o'clock in the morning to get inside to get a passport done. Yeah. But it is a systems issue. It is, I think it's political to the point that the political directorate ought to have an answer. They ought to find a solution to fix the problem. But if the same problem has existed in this country for the past 20 years, 25 years, that means that either we haven't quite found the answer yet, or the people that we have in place to affect the changes that we want to affect aren't doing an effective job of getting it done. which again leads to this whole idea of productivity in the workplace and in the national system. So there has to be a way to, we've identified the problem. We've always identified the problem. We've seen long lines. We've talked about the fact that I remember a few years ago, a former minister who was encouraging us to go and get your e-passports done because the systems were changing. People didn't take advantage of it the way they should, right? And when the systems changed and they needed to use the passport to travel, all of a sudden there was this rush on the passport office, right? Every year we're hearing the administrations, past and present, saying, don't wait till your passport expires, go and get your passport renewed, get your visas, etc. done. But we are last-minute society. We wait until the passport expires, then we rush in to try and get it done. I was down at the passport office myself several weeks ago, and I've heard stories with people who, when I arrived, said that they were standing out there from 3:30 in the morning. That's unconscionable.
Yeah.
I mean, in this day and age, it really should not be happening, right? So we know the problem, so I think it's incumbent on all of us now, particularly those who are in the private sector, to say to the government, listen, tell us what we can do to assist you with this problem, right? Because I don't think that any problem in this country certainly wasn't created overnight, but I think that governments ought to draw more on private sector expertise to help resolve some of the issues that are faced by the country.
But to add to what he's saying, with regards to the passport situation, remember I indicated that it could be a model setup just like the business license now. You got to look at a number of factors involved in a system like that, because if you're applying for your passport online, the passport office is asking for certain documents.
Verification.
Now, does everybody have access to
But the
a
online
machine?
system doesn't work. Online passport applications don't work.
No, I'm just saying. I'm just saying. If they're allowing Bahamians to apply online, and you have to submit other documents along with that, does everybody have access to
You need a scanner.
and fax machine and all that sort of thing?
Yeah.
Or do you have to hire another company to come in, or do you set up like how you have the stations with the post office? Do you set up places
Outstations.
around where a person can go in and submit their documents?
But to
make
his
it easy
point,
for them?
that's where the
Engaging
private sector,
yes.
consultation comes in. It's
Exactly.
not rocket science. It's not,
Yeah.
it's not something. But to a
happening
point though,
somewhere else.
what I find irresponsible is you will have members who 3 years ago were in government responsible for these things, and I'm not just saying the passport office, who were responsible for these things, and you talk about a systemic problem that's existed for 20 years, but suddenly you're very critical of an administration when you would have sat in that seat not so long ago, and the problems continue.
Yeah.
So, I look at it and I go, well, how are we supposed to take any of you seriously when it was your time, it was okay, but now that you're out, it is all fire and brimstone, the world is coming to an end, but you sat there not so long ago when this problem existed.
Yeah. Well, I call that the arrogance of politics. Right? I just call it the arrogance of politics. And I guess it's something that naturally happens, right? When you're in government, you do what you can to say you're going to fix the issue. When you're in opposition, you criticize what's happening in government. That's just the way it works. And it's unfortunate, but that's just
But
the
it's
way
up
it
to the
is.
Bahamian people to read between the lines and fully understand exactly all this
I
politics.
mean, you want us to read between lines. You first started with read. You first started with the word read.
When I say read between the lines, like Jerome and Sumner said, when they were in government, they couldn't get it done. Now they're not in government. They have all the solutions.
Yeah.
Come on.
But here's what I'd like to see, though, and I don't want to make this political, because I try to stay away from the political aspect of conversation. Right? I try to be neutral, Jerome.
Yeah, good.
That's why I
That's why he survived.
right? But I think it's important, though, that, and one of the things that I'm a bit perturbed about is this just all back and forth between the two major political organizations.
A lot of us
right?
are. A lot of
and
us
I'm
are
saying
perturbed.
that, that not every comment that is made requires a response.
Yes.
And not every response that is made requires another response.
Agreed.
Right? And I think if we were to pay more attention to the fundamental issues, and in my view, if anyone is genuinely concerned about the progress of the country, building of the nation, then you're going to find some common ground that government and opposition can work on together to advance a cause. Right? Not everything has to be acrimonious. Not everything has to be confrontational. And this goes on both sides of the divide.
Let me-
So I think that it's important then, as we talk about building the country, building the momentum, building the economy of the country, building up the morale of the people and the workers in the country. Can you imagine what it will do for the citizens of this country if you were to see the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition, the Minister of Finance and the Shadow Minister of Finance get together on the same platform and say, listen, we're going to shake hands and we're going to agree that this right here is a good way for the country to grow. And no matter what our political differences are, we're going to work on this particular objective to be sure that it gets done. Whatever that objective might be.
Only time you see it happen is after a hurricane.
And by then it's very different.
After a hurricane, that's the only time you see the bodies work together.
Let me interject and say something here that I want everyone who's listening, watching this to let it sink in. We continue to see the increase in the social needs of people in this country. And I will tell you right now, no rocket science, why that is. When this young man is on the street, gets killed, he has a girlfriend and children. The girlfriend can't go to work now because him who is going to work, at least she was staying home with the kids. Now she is still burdened with feeding the children. She goes to social services. When there's a repercussion of that, there's another young man. And as we continue to see murders in our country that takes young men who supports families away from support,
and the perpetrators,
the social burden in the state.
The perpetrators go to jail.
You understand me?
Yeah.
We need to address that because we're going to increase the social burden to a place. You think it's tough now. It's going to be a place where all of us have to take monies out of our pocket to supply that system until we stop young men from killing one another in the street because they're leaving children and families who have to now fend for themselves with no income. Can we stop and think about that?
Very good point. Gentlemen, we've got, do we have to go to a break? Are they telling me you have to go to a break? No, okay, good. So one more point I want to bring in. The amendments of the Immigration Act will allow for work permit exemptions for professionals coming into the country for less than 14 days. Again, touted as another plank in the ease of doing business. I have to ask, necessary or not?
I think if you look at it in comparison to the Commercial Enterprises Act, right, that came into force about a little over a year or so ago, that I understand why it's being done, right? Although I also understand the argument against it. The concern that I had was that we seem to have taken a portion of a wider bill to pass a segment of a bill, and that the wider immigration amendments bill is to be presented to Parliament for further discussion. And
the question is why not present one bill one time?
So yeah, that was the question. Why extract a part of it and not just pass the whole thing at one time? But I do understand that, of course, in my previous role leading the private sector organization at the Chamber, there were times when we would have heard complaints that people are coming in for a genuine business meeting, right? They have had a board meeting to attend or had a presentation to make at a board meeting, right? But particularly board meetings, right? They were detained at the airport, and in many instances we heard of people who were actually turned away at the airport, put into a holding area, and were instructed to take the next flight out of the country because they came in and they didn't get proper instructions that they had to acquire a work permit, even if it were to attend a board meeting.
Just for a meeting?
Yes. So I believe that this act, or this amendment to the Immigration Act, is making it easier and more convenient for people who are coming in for genuine business meetings. Now, when you come in for a business meeting in the past, it would have been your 2 days tops. Or you come in one day, you have your meeting for several hours a day, or 2 days tops, and then you're gone. Now we've extended that to 14 days.
Kind of a long time.
Yeah, and I think the criticism with the 14 days now is that you can do a lot of work in 14 days that may go undetected, right? Yes. And I saw some comments coming back from the Bahamas Institute of Chartered Accountants, where for you to come in and do audit work, you have to be licensed by BICA, and you have to come under their rules of engagement. But now it seems that is being extended.
I think some attorneys as well.
Attorneys as well have the same challenge.
Thing, yeah.
So while I understand the necessity for it, and it provides a convenience for people coming in to do business, I think the challenge is going to be that as a government, we've got to monitor when these people are coming in. We've got to monitor where they're going to work, which I'm sure is a part of the process. But if you no longer have to apply for this beforehand, and you're coming into immigration and you say, I'm here for a board meeting at company X, I'm here for 14 days, who's to monitor that you're actually doing that work? Right. So there is going to be a challenge with policing how this is actually managed.
Good point. Gentlemen, we are at the point of another break. Stay with us. You're watching On the Record. Our final segment is right after this. Hello and welcome to On the Record, a debate-style television talk show where Bahamians will find the balanced, true, and open debate they've been looking for.
And the icon goes to On the Record.
On the Record was born out of a desire to do something different. What we do every day helps our country, it helps our society, it helps to shape the views and opinions.
Listen, what is more dangerous than
Gentlemen,
corruption
we've got to move
is the
very quickly.
illusion
Let's
of
wrap up.
integrity.
It's all On the Record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Our discussion begins on the other side of this break. This is our final segment, facing the realities of government or governance, and walking the tightrope is our topic tonight. My guest, Brad McPhee, National Deputy Chairman of the Free National Movement, Leonard Sands, former President of the Contractors Association, and Edison Sumner, Principal of Sumner Strategic Partners, a commercial diplomacy consultancy. Gentlemen, have we, as a people, become too dependent upon our government and government systems? We want all these things from government. We rely so heavily, but then when they don't work, or the dependency is so great, it now creates an even greater problem for us.
Yeah. I think there's too much of a dependency on government, frankly.
And then who creates that? Because sometimes the politicians put the people in a position.
It's created by politics.
Yeah.
Politics creates it because the more you keep someone dependent on you, the more they will rely on you, and the more relevant you are in that person's life. But I think that if we were to take more initiative as a society, we were to become more self-starters, become more self-motivated to get things done, rely less on government to do things for us. Right? And we know there's been a tradition of, if you have a problem, you go to the MP, right? If you need something done, you go to the MP. And most people, when they can't get to the MP, they even go try to make a beeline straight to the Prime Minister's office, right? And I think in some cases, even though it may be a very critical opinion of mine, but I think sometimes the Prime Minister is too accessible. Right?
Oh, I agree with you on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, so there are times when I think, as a society, we need to take initiative. Right. So, for example, very simply put, you have a hole in your road. There's a big hole in the road. Yes, we're paying taxes to keep our roads repaired. Yes, we're paying taxes to maintain our physical and fiscal infrastructure. But if you can go and dump some curry dirt in the road just to patch it for the time being until the people arrive, do it. Right? I mean, yeah, we're going to call the people and say, hey, there's a hole in the road, come and fix the hole. But if it's taking them 6 months to get to you, we can stand and complain all we want. But the hole is still in the road when you have the power to do something about it.
And you have these community organizations, and you have neighborhood watches, and all these community groups and groups of people, and like you say, allow them to stand back and wait.
Yeah.
Sharon, the challenge is, and we spoke about it off here, we have, as a country and community of people, we have been fed a poor diet of civics. We don't know how our country works. We don't know enough about how our government works. We continue to see, we ask for our brothers and sisters who work for the hospitals to get raises, who works for police force to get wages, water and sewage, got to get raised. Every aspect of our teachers, everyone wants to get raised every 4 years, and we never think about, well, who's going to pay the raise increase? Guess who's going to pay? We're going to pay the wage increase. Then we complain that VAT has gone up. Then we complain that the debt has gone up. Well, if we kind of stop asking your friends and family to ask their leaders for increases, we probably wouldn't have these increases. So again, I think this administration and all administrations in the future need to understand that we need a generation of retooling and teaching our community how government work. You can't want at the same time the Green Island over there, a new dump over here, a new hospital over there, and think nothing will cost more. That just is impractical.
But Rod, the reality is, a government wants to get re-elected. How are you going to make these changes and can add on these taxes and try to have this cultural shift when people can say, wait a minute, we've been having all of these things all along, and now you want to change the way we live?
For the last probably for the past 50 years, it's been this ham and turkey view, where my MP and my government have to do such and such and such. But in reality, in most other countries, governments are not involved in power generation or BTC or whatever the case may be.
Utilities.
The governments are more regulators. The private sector deals with providing electricity, phone services.
People
et
still
cetera, et
angry
cetera.
about BTC.
That's fine,
People are still angry about that.
But sometimes we have to look at the box and we have to look at how other countries are set up and see where their governments are. You don't see congressmen and senators dropping off ham and turkey and Mother's Day flowers. Okay, no. Their job, their responsibility is to get your views on what policy you would like to see.
Yes.
And that's the government job, to implement policy to control or to regulate the different entities that provide the services for the people. But we still stuck on, if I don't get my ham and turkey, I vote
for you.
I don't care what kind of policy you make. I just want my ham and turkey.
Oh, my mommy died. You ain't come to the funeral. You ain't come to the
We
funeral.
do have some people who still, they still want to know what's going on in terms of certain bills being passed and stuff like that.
But I think there should be mechanism in place for that, right? Number one, I don't want them to come into my house.
I say it all the time. I don't need to see my. No, honestly, I tell them, no, I don't need to see you.
I don't need them to come into my house.
I'm not
right?
interested in that.
If I have a problem, I will reach out to them. But most of the problems I have, I find ways to deal with it. Because if I relied on an MP to come and deal with me, I would be sorely disappointed every time. I don't wait for an MP to show up to a relative's funeral or wedding, right, to validate what's going on. But yes, what I think
Or speak for 20 minutes.
Speak for 20 minutes. But yes, what I think we can do to correct that. I'm talking about dependence on government, right? I think that we need to look at the level of productivity in the country, both in the public and private sector, also as measuring the national productivity levels in the country. And I think that one of the ways that we can improve government services, we can improve what's happening in the economy generally, is finding ways to increase the level of output, right? When we look at the inputs into the economy, labor and resources and capital injections and natural resources, etc. How do we use those opportunities to create better outputs coming out of the economy of the country? So when we talk about relying on government, yes, we need to improve government services. Definitely, there has to be an entire cultural shift in the way government services are run. But we also need to take responsibility as citizens of this country in how we can improve the area around us that we work and live. Right? We cannot depend on government for everything. Government can't do it on their own. And if any government thinks that they can run a country without private sector engagement, they're going to be sorely disappointed. If any government thinks that they can't run a country without civil society's engagement, then they're going to be sorely disappointed because they just cannot do it. But it's going to be up to people like us in the private sector, in the civil society, to advise government on ways we think they can improve, and also to do our part in taking some of the pressure off of government. And if we take the pressure off of government and we start to take some initiatives to do things ourselves, then we could also, over time, reduce the cost of government. Because now, you don't have to call, the 5 repairmen to come fix a 6-inch hole in the road and spend 5 hours doing it.
Yeah, agreed.
Right?
Yeah.
So there are ways that we can
on a
help
Saturday.
on a Saturday.
Yeah.
Right?
So, gentlemen, we're just about out of time. Nana, I'm going to start with you. The next 3 years are really going to be critical for this government. What do, from your perspective, the FNM needs to do really if it intends to regain some of the lost ground in the past 2
What
years?
I think quickly they need to do, I will not rest until I see it happen, widespread on the island of New Providence housing scheme. There's pent-up demand. There's a lot of product on the market from the banks that failed mortgages and what's not. Come up with a structure to get people into the housing and improve those areas and create housing that people can afford. If we be creative, talk to Mr. Sumner, talk to other people out there, create a financing option that could work.
And then people got to learn to pay their bills. That's another show.
That's true.
You can't get a mortgage and then don't pay it for 3
No,
years
that's true, but
and
then
be
you
mad
need-
because the people ask you to move.
You need a strong enough economy to support the job
Agreed.
itself. So
Agreed. All right,
housing
Brad.
and economy.
Brad, from your perspective, what does your party need to do now to regain that lost ground that you have obviously lost with some voters and supporters in the past 2 years?
I think pretty much the government needs to educate the people more on exactly what they're doing. and after this budget, what's coming up, you're going to see a whole new slate of projects coming on stream. Investors, you're looking at a number of projects. I think they're supposed to expand on the Over the Hill project, and that's right now that's $5 million. So you're going to see a whole list of stuff, or a whole heap of stuff taking place. And once the government, it's good that we're doing it, but it's even better when you let the people know and they can actually see, touch, feel.
We call them tangibles.
Right.
They're the tangibles that people want. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on this evening and having this discussion. It's been a very good one, an eye-opening, refreshing, and you know, it's important that we understand how our government works and how it's supposed to work for us. I always remind people that, you know, we vote a government in. You know, they work on our behalf, and so it is up to us to ensure that they work properly for us and they work efficiently for us. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. Appreciate the discussion. We hope that you've enjoyed tonight's show. Special thanks to our guest, Brad McPhee, the National Deputy Chairman of the Free National Movement, Leonard Sands, who's the former President of the Contractors Association and a lecturer at the University of the Bahamas, and Edison Sumner, whose title is really long. But thank you for coming. Also, thank you to my producer and technical staff. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. We'll see you next time right here on The Record.